For me, good wine starts with who's farming the grapes.
So an AVA is American Viticulture Area. That is basically a designation of boundaries for wine grape growing regions in the United States. This is designated by the federal government, which is the TTB. Having an AVA such as Contra Costa really allows the wineries, the grape growers, the winemakers to give the consumer identification of where these grapes are growing from.
Wine is ultimately a value-added agricultural product, no different than jelly or honey. But wine is the one thing I think that brings people together. And I think being a part of that and continuing the history of winemaking, especially in California, is really exciting.
It was always one of my dad and Becky's ideas that we come together as a whole Contra Costa, the two sides of the county, basically so that we could prove that we all as Contra Costa United could create quality grapes.
To be considered an AVA is a scientific petition to the federal government that includes soil type, topography, highs, lows, climate influence, rain, fog, all those factors are considered. The significance of having an AVA as far as a wine grape grower or somebody in agricultural making wine is significant because it identifies the region that the grapes are coming from. That helps with consumers identifying the wine. Also, certain AVAs or appellations have wine characteristics different than others, as far as like people like Napa Cab. That's significant to that AVA. And so will be some of the wines that we produce here.
My grandfather was born in Philo, Mendocino County in about early 1860s. We started farming in Brentwood, the family did, somewhere in the early to mid 1880s. So grain was great in the 1880s, 1890s, until the railroad got active in the early 1900s. That's evolved through bumps and grinds in different crops to where we are today. And I've grown, in my career in farming, I've grown at least 50 different crops. And about 13 or 14 years ago, we thought we'd try grapes. Fortunately, I got a winemaker. Our grandson is a winemaker.
You know, wine is agriculture, wine is hospitality, wine is restaurant service, wine is geography. Wine is at a sort of a confluence of a lot of different industries. Nunn Farms has been farming for a long time, and we've been growing high quality produce for a long time. So we were confident that when we planted grapes, we could grow high quality grapes that could be used to make high quality wine.
My family immigrated here from Italy in the early 1900s, and after traveling around the United States, they ended up settling here in Martinez in 1920. There was an established vineyard already that was planted in 1888 by the Kelly estate. It was mainly a fruit and nut farm originally, and they sold the grapes to home winemakers. After Prohibition, there was a decline in home winemaking, and so they had a surplus of grapes, and my great-grandfather, Conrad, decided that he was going to start his own winery. And so in 1946, we became a bonded winery here in Martinez. We're looking forward to the future, having our 6th generation farmers and 5th generation winemakers here at Viana Winery. So we dry farm here. We rely on Mother Nature for our water supply. We're not actually able to irrigate our crops because there is no viable water. There's thought that by dry farming, you stress the plant a little bit harder, and that way you get a little bit more quality of grape because the plant is throwing everything it can into the grape cluster to survive. In January, we start pruning, what you're doing is you're setting up the crop for this year and the following year. You're kind of sculpting the vine into what you want it to look like. All those things, the canopy management, light exposure, the crop production, everything is being put into that one snip.
About March the 20th or so, the grapevines will wake up. So we fertilize, we spray, we irrigate, we mow, and then somewhere around the 1st of August, let's say, we go into a period of what's called veraison, which is basically sugar formation. And you can taste that at about 12 bricks, so 12% sugar. You can start to feel the softening of the berries and taste the sugar in the berries. And then we pick anywhere from 19% sugar to 24.5% sugar, depending on variety. This ranch here was purchased by my grandfather in 1945. My father farmed it after him, and then I started farming it in 1994. My 2 sons are farming it now. We got into the wine grape business in 1996 and signed long-term planting contracts with Kendall Jackson. Also, my wife Becky also has a wine label, and she's been in the wine business for how long?
Since 2004 was our first vintage, our commercial
20
bottling.
years, yeah.
So 20 years this year.
It's the vine that tells you when they're ready to be harvested. There's no calendar. It's different from year to year. One year you're harvesting all done by September. Last year we harvested clear into October.
It's amazing to watch all the transitions of the stages of the vines as well, because at every different stage, there's something to do out there. And again, our goal at the end of all of this is to choose quality over quantity. Our focus isn't on making the most wine we can possibly make. It's making the best wine that we could make.
So here at Serendipity Cellars, we are an estate winery. We grow, produce, and bottle on site. We keep it small. We're less than 2,000 case production a year. When we produce wine, I don't chemically alter or do anything that the wine should not have. So most people that come and consume our wine walk away saying, wow, I didn't get a headache from your wine. So it's a nice compliment when people say that.
You know, 9,315 vines were planted here by hand. And we will never, ever, ever forget, you know, every single person that was out here hand planting a vine, tying the vine, the rebar, the stakes, the T-posts. So, I mean, it truly was a labor of love by so many. But that is what I think you feel when you're here.
Yeah,
you know?
we're truly family owned and operated.
Yeah.
So the fermentation process takes anywhere from 3 or 4 days to a week and a half, depending on the situation and the varietal. So right towards the end of my alcoholic fermentation, I'll go ahead and start my malolactic fermentation. And you're converting it to lactic acid using a specific yeast designed for that process. You're softening up the wine a little bit, making it really nice. When we finally get to where we need to be, if it's at 0 bricks or below 0 bricks, we go ahead and we press it. Then we let the wine sit for about 3 or 4 days. And then from there, we rack it off what they call the heavy lees, which is basically sediment. And we put it in the barrels. Sophia Favalora Vineyard, I planted in 1999. I had been involved with grapes and learning about them for 10 years prior to that. But eventually I bought my own property and planted my own vineyard. I have the Zinfandel and I have the Carignan and the Barbera on my vineyard. And recently I grafted over Mataro, so the main ones that are known from Oakley. One thing about Oakley wines is we have a lot of what you call ancient vines that are over 100 years old. So some of my wines that I make come from that. I also make rosé from my grapes, from the Carignan and the Barbera. And for those, I use strictly stainless steel. I never use any oak barrels for them. Just like with white wines, most white wines are made in stainless steel. The one thing about Oakley is nobody grows white grapes in Oakley because the weather's just too hot, so it's not conducive for it. Basically, Oakley's a red wine territory. We have a different terroir because of the sandy soil, and then we have cool down at night. So we have a microclimate based off the confluence of the Sacramento, San Joaquin rivers. So it gives us a kind of a unique spot for growing grapes. And a lot of people from all over California buy the grapes from Oakley. People in Napa, Sonoma. I sell to Sonoma and to Napa, and so do a lot of people in Oakley. The Oakley wines have their own characteristics. One is that they're a nice, fruity, balanced wine, and they have a nice pepper finish on them with slight tannins.
Once we're ready to bottle, we hook up some pump systems from the stainless steel tanks all the way to the bottling line. The people at the beginning of the bottling line will flip the cases over. Then it will go into an area where the bottles are cleaned. From the cleaning stage, it then gets filled. You'll see a little piece of metal that goes down into the top of it. That's just to make sure every bottle's filled to the same exact line. Then it goes to our corking station. It'll then go around to the opposite side of the bottling line where we have all the labels. From the label machine, it then gets hand packed into our boxes and then put on pallets and put into our bond room. Hannah Nicole Vineyards and Winery was established in 1999 when the Cohen family purchased the 80 acres we're sitting on now. It was originally supposed to be apple orchards and just a little fun side hobby of wine. Later on in the early 2000s, the market went down in apples, so the family decided to pull everything out and produce wine instead. Their overall goal was to establish an event center and full all-modern winery here in Contra Costa County. In 2012, the Cohen family sold the property to an investment company, Gentai Corporations, who then came in with investment money to help continue the legacy of the Cohen family and kept the name of Hannah Nicole Vineyards, where today we are still a very large part of the community and love to give back and make sure that we still run the facility and the grounds just like the Cohen family had envisioned in the beginning. And then on top of our tasting room, we will host anywhere from birthday parties to weddings, quinceañeras. We do our summer concert series here every single year. We have our dance parties at night, our wine club release parties for all of our wine club members, special events that just members only can come to. There's always something happening here at Hannah Nicole for all ages.
Our family's been farming in Brentwood, in the west side of Brentwood, for about 40 years. My brother and I now carry that torch. Right now we currently farm on this particular ranch 40 acres of California olives and also 7 varieties of wine grapes. The climate and the things that are out here in the west side of Brentwood anyway are really adequate for growing olives and wine grapes. We've been needing to get our own AVA out here for years just because of the simple fact that we've been growing wine grapes for over 100 years and people have been buying them from Napa and Sonoma and these other areas and making great wine with our product. This area has probably the best wine grape farmers that I've ever seen. We should be able to make our own wine here and have a really good product come out of it.
We always loved vineyards, and the first time we came here was in 2013, and our daughter had a photo shoot here for her graduation. We ended up getting to know the owners, and then we ended up having a Christmas party here at the vineyard, and it was amazing. And the next thing you know, about a year later, I ended up having a vision of buying the property and building a church here and really serving our community. We didn't know anything about making wine. We didn't know anything about farming. My wife thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. And we took this big step of faith and bought the vineyard, and it's been such a blessing ever since. So I reached out to Contra Costa Growers Association, actually, and they were great. And Becky Bloomfield is our president, and her husband is Tom Bloomfield, is a farmer. He's been farming here for 45 years. And I was basically their apprentice for the first year. So I learned how to farm through them, and after the first year, I took the training wheels off and really dove into the farming. And the farming is critical because it's all about the fruit. Without good fruit, you're not going to have good wine.
The Contra Costa Winegrowers Association was basically a concept in about 2000 that Jeff and Sarah Tamayo had. And they had a dinner over at their house that Neil Cohn from Hannah Nicole, the founder of Hannah Nicole Winery, myself, and Dwight Meadows, a dry farm Zinfandel grower over in Oakley, went to the meeting, and we decided that we were going to start a countywide Winegrower Association at that time. So the Winegrower Association was created, and it's been an operation for about 24 years.
I'd say the main benefit for being a member of the Contra Costa Winegrowers Association is the fact that we have united as small farms, small wineries, large wineries, to represent our area. They also expanded the Central Coast and San Francisco Bay to allow us to have basically the rights to use 3 AVAs. That's a huge benefit to growers for pricing of grapes. It's a huge benefit to wineries who want to put estate grown on their bottles, because you cannot do that unless you actually have a federal AVA.
It's a very high recognition, and for a winery, you know, we get to now put estate on our bottles.
Yeah.
And having estate on your bottle of wine is probably one of the highest recognitions you could have on that bottle, because the criteria it takes to have that on there, it is literally, it's grown, produced, bottled on site, never leaves the site.
Getting the AVA was just pivotal because now people really know that we are a wine grape growing region and a winemaking region, and we're now on the map. So it's very encouraging for other new wine grape growers and wineries that want to come into this area to actually be able to make it and have our brand and our area recognized throughout not just California, but the United States.
Contra Costa County is one of the oldest growing regions in the state of California, even older than Napa. It's just because of Prohibition that it never took off, because everything was ripped out. That's why we have all the cherries and apple orchards and tomatoes instead of grapes, because of Prohibition. So we're hoping that with the AVA, it's going to draw more of a crowd and more people here into Contra Costa County to help develop our wineries. We love to collaborate with one another to hopefully expand more. We always talk about upcoming events with one another, at least with the other wineries, with tasting rooms, so that way we try not to overlap with one another.
The community aspect of the Winegrowers Association has been really beneficial, and we're happy to be involved in furthering the history of Contra Costa County wine.
It's nice to be part of the Winegrowers because it gives us access to having advertisement and doing events over on the other side with the Brentwood and Oakley wineries.
I've been involved for the last 5 or 6 years, and I've really seen things happen, including getting the AVA designation, which is totally going to help our situation throughout Contra Costa County.
It's a compilation of a great group of people, other winemakers, people who have been in the farming industry their entire life. They're, second, third, fourth generation farmers. There's a lot of history on one board, and it's pretty phenomenal. And then just the things that the winegrowers have been able to do, the publicity, the different events that take place that the winegrowers host, like our trolley event.
The trolley event's huge.
The trolley event is just a ton of fun, and it gets better every year.
AVAs help. AVAs make people aware of wine grapes and the grape quality. AVAs are why people get in their vehicle and travel for wine tasting. AVAs are why people purchase 15 acres and put a winery in on a small piece of property. AVAs are hotels, AVAs are restaurants, AVAs are rental cars. I think it's going to be huge in the future.